D. Maceman, Ginadonic, 1025, 1063 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Bingen here with you, David Janes as well. I'd like to start off today's show by wishing Big Joe Dubin the best of luck with his upcoming colonoscopy. Good luck, Joe.
That's very nice of you.
We're pulling for you. Do you guys have any thoughts on colonoscopies?
Well, I've had one.
So. I have not.
Yeah, I've had.
It's coming.
It's important. It's
I've
important
had
to do.
two.
You've had two?
Yes, I had one when I was 45, and then I had another when I was 50. So I'll probably have another one in another 10 years, 10 years. I'm trying to stay on top of this, Adam.
Yeah.
As
is
men, we
it a
gotta stay on
special?
top
Get
of it.
two colonoscopies, get the third free?
I wish it was, but
Well-
I don't think insurance companies think that way.
Yeah.
Neither do doctors.
They tell you when you have one, okay, this is you need to come back, and
Exactly.
some need to come back
Yeah.
a little earlier than others based on what they see. But
because they may see polyps,
Yeah.
things like that, and
This is what you guys tuned in for, right?
Yeah.
To hear us talking about colonoscopies.
That's what I
don't-
wanna
I didn't know if
listen to.
it was a colonoscopy awareness day, but it is an important thing.
It is.
Yeah.
For you men out there.
Yeah.
Good luck,
It's,
Big Joe.
It's not the most fun experience, but
No.
it's very important.
You got to do it. I also
Yeah.
do want to give an actual shout out to Salsarita's Fresh Mexican Grill at 2515 West End Avenue, right in the heart of Vandy country. They are feeding us today here at the
yes.
station. So make sure you get your dinner for the Vandy game tonight. You can get it delivered. You can get it picked up. That's Salsarita's Fresh Mexican Grill, 2515 West End Avenue. Shout out to Salsaritas for feeding us, and they can feed you as well. It is Super Bowl week, gentlemen. Yesterday was, quote unquote, Super Bowl opening night, which is a fancy way of saying Super Bowl Media Day.
That's what they used to call it.
And we are going to talk about something that was said at Super Bowl opening night by DeAndre Hopkins. We're going to get into that in a little bit. But it's time for Super Bowl week when you hear hard-hitting questions asked of professional athletes like this.
How can I get more handsome? How can I get more handsome? My girlfriend says I'm the most handsome quarterback in the league. Any advice, like something to do with my hair? I'm desperate for anything.
I don't know if I can help you on that one. That sounds like a DNA thing.
That was Jalen Hurts being asked, how can I be more handsome like you? My girlfriend says you're the most handsome quarterback in the league. And his response was, I don't know if I can help you. I think that's a DNA thing.
Hey, he's telling the truth.
But
I mean,
a lot of strange questions get asked at Super Bowl opening night. One thing I have enjoyed talking to with our very own Jared Stillman, who is live at the Super Bowl on Radio Row. He'll be there again starting at 2:00. The guests that people get during Super Bowl week on Radio Row, and it's an eclectic mix. And Brian Curtis, who works for The Ringer, has labeled these people by their days. Like, he's a Monday guy. If you're a Monday guy, that means you're at the bottom of the totem pole. Ryan Leaf was on Jared's show yesterday. Ryan Leaf on Jared's show. Ryan Leaf has big Monday guy energy. You want to be?
I actually think Ryan Leaf is a really interesting guy to talk to.
It was a good
We've had him
interview.
on the show.
It was
before.
a good interview.
He's underrated.
But you want to be a Thursday guy. Thursday guy is the top of the heap, according to Brian Curtis, because most people leave on Friday.
Right.
So on Thursday, that's when you get the best guests. So if you're a Thursday guy, that's a good thing. If you're a Monday guy, you got to work your way up.
I know the drill, man. I have done it. I did it a few times. I was there when you guys were in Atlanta.
Yeah.
That was the first time I did it. And then a couple years after that, even when you guys were not in the Super Bowl, I did Darren McFarland and I. It is work. Let me tell you, because it's a juggling act. You have to fight for position. You've done it.
Yes. Yes. But what if the Thursday guy could only come on Monday? Like, because of his schedule.
That's a good question.
Yes.
I asked Jared, who are the Tuesday guys? So yesterday, Jared had Ryan Leaf. He had Thomas Dimitrov, the former Falcons GM who interviewed for the Titans job. He had Solomon Wilcots, and he had Albert Breer of Sports Illustrated. Today, Jared is having Chris Mad Dog Russo, who I guess is a Tuesday guy. But I'm always interested in the hierarchy here. You don't want to be a Monday guy. You want to be a Thursday guy. Friday guys, I think, are better than Wednesday guys, but they're not much better. I don't know. There's a science to this.
I don't think there's a science to the day. But I will say this, that if you hustle, you'll get interesting people to talk
Yeah.
to. That's the cool part about being on Radio Row. By Friday, everybody's so fried because it is a dogfight. Radio Row, there's so many people there. And I might want to have Adam Vingan on my show, but if there's 12 other stations that would also like to have Adam on their show, and Adam only has 45 minutes total, then it's
what do you do?
Start elbowing your way, and you got people that
it's survival of
Adam
the
has
fittest down
know
there.
people.
It's a crazy dynamic.
It's
just to
survival
get 5
of
or
the
6
fittest down
minutes,
there.
and then you'll ask 2 questions, and then somebody behind you will start giving you the wrap it up tornado. 2 many men on the ice.
Make sure you ask him about the laundry detergent he's here sponsor it.
Right. You get these signals, and they're like, he's got to go. They point to the watch. He's got to go. He's got to get to the mic.
That's the worst when someone points to the watch.
Yeah.
And
It makes you want to go a little longer.
Yeah,
it does. It does.
I'm like, I don't want to listen to you. I'm going to keep him as long as I want.
Right. But everybody does that. You're
Yes.
saying, well, he's supposed to come over here at 1:30. And then it's like 1:50, and you're like, tell him to get over here.
Yeah.
Give him the sign. Tell him to point to the watch to get him out of here.
Oh, man. But Jerry will be live on Radio Row starting at 2:00. Can't wait to see the Tuesday guys that he gets. So I've been looking at mock drafts, as is my want at this time of year, because the Titans have the number 1 pick in the draft. And I've seen a lot of mock drafts lately. I read one from The Athletic about a week ago that had the Titans taking Abdul Carter from Penn State with the number 1 overall pick. And it got me thinking, we asked this to Teron Davenport yesterday. The big news in the NFL yesterday, Myles Garrett requesting a trade from the Cleveland Browns. And we talked with Teron about how that could affect the NFL draft. So the Cleveland Browns could be down a premier pass rusher. This is what I thought was funny. A week ago at the Senior Bowl, Browns GM Andrew Berry was asked, this was the actual question he was asked. If someone sees you at dinner tonight and says, we'll give you 2 first-round picks for Myles, do you say, I'm not interested? His response, correct. You can put that on the record. That was a week ago. And now Myles Garrett wants out of Cleveland. Now, of course, it's up to the Browns to acquiesce to his demands. We'll see if that actually happens. But I'm wondering if the Titans could take advantage of this. They have the number 1 pick. I believe Cleveland is at 2. So could the Titans take advantage of this Myles Garrett situation? Because if he leaves and the Browns want to replace him with Abdul Carter, what could that trade look like? And I was thinking about trades that have happened in recent NFL draft history where a team moved up 1 spot. And the first that came to mind was in 2017, the Bears traded up 1 spot with the 49ers in the first round for Mitch Trubisky. They moved from 3 to 2 in order to acquire Mitch Trubisky in the draft. And the 49ers came away with the number 3 pick, so they moved down 1. They came away with a 3rd-round pick, a 4th-round pick, and a 3rd-round pick in the next draft. So they moved down 1 spot. They get a 3rd-round pick, a 4th-round pick, and another 3rd-round pick. So could the Titans take advantage of the Myles Garrett situation by trying to coerce the Browns to move up 1 to take Abdul Carter to replace Myles Garrett? This was just something I was thinking about last night. I would love for your opinions on it.
I think there's a couple ways you could go with that too. There's also the whole Deshaun Watson cloud. They need the quarterback too, the Browns. So could you manipulate that some? There's a lot of things that I think you have to put together, all going back to my thought that I have bought into the philosophy of there is nothing more valuable than the first pick in terms of what value you can get back. You just went through a pretty decent haul just for moving 1 slot. You wouldn't think maybe off the top of your head you could get that much for just 1 spot, but they got 3 extra picks for 1 spot?
Right. They moved down 1. So they went from the 49ers went from 2 to 3. They also got a 3rd-round pick, a 4th-round pick, and a 3rd-round pick in the next in
Right.
the following year.
So all of this to say, in this discussion, I think we'll probably have 25 to 35 of these proposed trades, or would you do this? Would you do that? Maybe more than that. I'm probably selling it short because the draft's not for a few months. But to just pick the first guy and do nothing else, to me, is the worst thing you could do.
To me, if I'm teams, I wouldn't do anything until free agency starts. If I'm Cleveland, really, I'm not doing anything till free agency starts. Why? Because if I'm going to trade Myles Garrett, I want I want that type of pass rusher back on my team. And there's only one way I can get that. But I also need a quarterback. So how do I get a quarterback and still put myself in a position to get that rush in that we're going to have to replace? Not to say he's going to be Myles Garrett, but we need that production. So how do I do that? Well, if I'm Cleveland, I'm like, okay, I am waiting to free agency. I need to see what Minnesota, if indeed Darnold is a guy that I can live with for the next 5 years, because obviously he would be an upgrade to the quarterbacks they have on their roster. If Minnesota chooses not to franchise tag Darnold, then I'm like, okay, let me get Darnold, position myself up to number 1 so I can then get the rush in, because the Titans may move out of that position with another team. So let me move up, get Abdul Carter, and now I've essentially have what we believe is our franchise quarterback for the next 5-6 years, and we get our rush in that we're trying to replace. So if I'm Cleveland now, what would they give up to move up to that number 1 spot? I'm not sure.
Well, would you take, I mean, I would take the package if that were offered to me, the package that the Bears gave to the 49ers to move up 1 spot from 3 to 2. I'm not sure what it would be moving up from 2 to 1. But if the Browns, because how many times do we see a player demand a trade, request a trade, and the team that he's on ultimately not trade him?
We've seen it a lot.
That doesn't
more times than not.
That doesn't happen a ton, where the team's like, no, we're not going to trade you, despite the fact that you've been open about the fact that you don't want to play here. I mean, Myles Garrett ultimately will not be playing for the Cleveland Browns, even if their GM said a week ago, you can put on the record that I'm not going to trade him. So if I can move down 1 spot, pick up an extra 3rd, a 4th, and a 3rd in next year's draft, and still have my pick of quarterback or whatever I want to do, if that's what I want to do, I'm all for it. I'm just curious if that could be used as a blueprint to move down 1 spot.
But if I'm moving up from 1 to 2, then I'm asking for a little bit more than what that trade.
That's fair.
Because we're in a different year, in a different position. So that's what I would be asking for. That's why I said, if I'm Cleveland, I'm not looking to do anything right now. And I'm not even indicating whether I'm going to trade Myles Garrett or not. I need to see, if I don't believe one of these quarterbacks is a quarterback and be my guy, then I'm waiting till free agency starts. And if Sam Darnold is not franchise tag, then if you feel he can be your guy for X amount of years, then you go after him. And then now you're more in a position to trade Myles Garrett to
the Titans. Come around on Darnold? That's $40 million a year.
But
we were in agreement.
No, I think he's going to get
not on my list.
He's going to get less.
I have
than
seen 30. Some
I'm talking
reports.
about.
I have seen some reports that a conservative estimate is around 30, closer to 30 million per season.
But I'm saying
40 million.
But I'm saying Cleveland, because Cleveland, if they move away from Myles Garrett, they would have to replace that production as well as get a quarterback.
Yeah. So you're saying you want Cleveland to go after him.
Cleveland go after Darnold.
Do they have that kind of budget, knowing what they have to pay for Deshaun Watson? Like that is
I don't know the ins and outs of the Browns.
Hey, if you're getting rid of Myles Garrett,
we read it the other day.
If you get out of Myles Garrett's deal, then that's money you have back in your space.
A lot of money to sink in on the quarterback position.
I'm just saying, I don't think he's going to get $40 million. I don't think he's going to get $40 million. I think it's going to be mid to high 30s, but I don't think he's going to get 40 a year. But that's just me.
But you're not saying for the Titans.
No, I'm not. No.
You're still not a Darnold Titan.
Yeah. No. Because I think the Titans are in a different position
Yeah.
than I believe the Cleveland Browns are in. But to answer your question, Adam, yes, I would, but it would have to be a little bit more.
I couldn't find an example of someone moving from 1 to 2. I
Mhm.
was looking at first overall pick trades, but most of them involve a significant jump
Yeah.
from like 1 to 9 or 1 to 12. I couldn't find one that was 1 to 2. And then I was looking at trades where the teams only swapped one spot. And the one that I found that was most recent was the trade I'm referencing from 2017 when the Bears moved from 3 to 2 to draft Mitch Trubisky. That didn't
What
work
was
out
the
so well.
how many slots did the Rams move up when they traded with the Titans in 2016?
That I'll have to look up.
Was they 5th?
Because you have to look at the Giants at number 3, just because of their need of a quarterback. And then, of course, you've got the Raiders at 6.
The Rams were picking at 15
Oh, wow.
15. Okay.
and moved up to 1.
They moved up. Whew.
Did they not have another pick in there? That's it. So
They
because
moved
the
from
Titans
15
ended
to
up wheeling
1.
and dealing, and what was Conklin, the 8th pick that
Yeah.
year, something in there. So somehow the Titans ended up getting back into a position to. There was a lot of wheeling and dealing
Hold
that
on.
day.
They went from 15th to 1st with no like in betweens.
As I understand it, there were more picks involved.
There was a lot of picks involved.
There were
Man,
tons
that's what
of
I'm
picks
saying.
involved.
That's a big jump. You really believed in Jared Goff if that's the case. Well, I guess they did go to the Super Bowl with him. So hey.
But I can't imagine. I just wonder what the cost is to move one spot.
Yeah. Would it be
But
that?
The
but
Titans did
pricey.
it one time years ago, not at the very top of the draft, but
Uh-huh.
in the first round, they traded one spot. And I believe the players involved, I got to go back and look at this, were Jeremy Shockey and I think Albert Hainsworth, if I've got that right. The Giants and
Titans.
Titans flopped one spot, I think.
Mm.
I think the Titans moved down, or maybe it was the Titans moving up. I got to remember. But that was one that I remember. I was like, one spot? Are you sure you couldn't have got the guy? Or like one of that was an interesting one, lower in the first round.
I have to remember. So in 2016, the Titans picked 8th. That was their first pick, and they
Right.
took Jack Conklin.
But there was another trade
where they took the
after
15th pick.
they made the trade with the Rams. They made
Okay.
another trade to get to 8, and I don't remember all the pieces
Right.
together. If you can, congratulations, because that was there was a lot involved.
But I've seen a lot of. We've talked about draft comps. I've seen a lot of Abdul Carter and Micah Parsons. And a lot of teams would love to have Micah Parsons. The
Mhm.
Titans would love to have Micah Parsons. But I'm wondering with the Browns situation, it's inevitable. It feels inevitable that they are going to trade Myles Garrett. They do not want a disgruntled Myles Garrett on their roster. That trade should happen. If they're looking to replace him, Abdul Carter is the best bet in the draft. So I'm wondering if the Browns could be convinced to move up
Yeah.
one spot and the Titans can start recouping picks by doing that.
We know one thing about the Browns is they have done some wacky things for the past. The other thing that we know is there have been many disgruntled players who have asked for trades. It a lot of times does not yield the return that
Right.
you should get for a player of that magnitude, right? You can go down the list: Randy Moss and Terrell Owens and Antonio Brown. Remember
Yeah.
that one? Good grief! There's just been a bunch of them, and they're in a tough spot because I think part of them is Aaron Rodgers a couple years ago. Remember, there was like they made the deal. They were like, "Yes, we'll trade you to the Jets," and the Jets were like, "Okay, well, we don't want to give you anything. You know that you're trading him to us. He's the only team. We're the only team that he
Yeah.
says he's going to play for. So why don't you just give him to us?" No, we got to get something back.
Well, that's
And
been
they
a lot of-
haggled for months, right?
That's been a lot of the conjecture.
And finally end up trading him.
And that was even knowing who he was going to.
Right.
We don't know who wants Myles Garrett right now.
That's been a lot of the conjecture with the Luka Doncic, Anthony Davis trade. They kept it so secretive that only the Lakers were involved in the bidding. If the Mavericks had opened up the bidding to more teams, they probably could have ended up with more than they got for Luka Doncic, but that's a different sport entirely.
Mhm.
But I would love your thoughts on this. 615-737-1025. The idea of the Titans moving down one spot if the Browns lose Myles Garrett so that they can replace him with Abdul Carter, or would you like the Titans to take Abdul Carter at number 1? Your thoughts on that. 615-737-1025. I was just doing a little armchair GMing in my spare time last night. I tend to do that. Back segment. This week, Stillman and Company is broadcasting live and providing live updates from New Orleans on Radio Row, leading up to the big game. You know which big game I'm talking about. Coverage presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, Hiller Plumbing, Heating and Electrical, and Family Leisure.
Hey, happy Tuesday. This is Derek Mason. You heard me tell you about Dr. Lodge and his staff over at Cool Springs MD for some time. If you set out to lose weight, chances are it's not the first time setting a resolution or goal to shed some extra pounds only to face disappointment. But at Cool Springs MD, Dr. Lodge and his team understands the frustration of this cycle, and that is why they offer a different approach to weight loss. Their comprehensive weight loss program is led by Dr. Jeffrey Lodge and addresses the root cause of weight gain with tailored nutrition, exercise, blood test supplements, and more. They will customize a program specific to you and you only. So connect with Dr. Lodge at CoolSpringsMD.com today to schedule your appointment for a personalized weight loss plan just for you. That's Cool Springs MD, where your weight loss journey becomes a success story.
This week's Nashville's best deal is Prince's Hot Chicken, the original and iconic hot chicken joint. Get half off a $25 gift card now while supplies last at thegamenashville.com/deals. The gift card is only good for the Tanger Outlets location in Antioch and inside Assembly Food Hall in downtown Nashville. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan joined on our phone line driven by WilsonCountyHunter.com by ESPN NFL analyst Tim Hasselbeck. Tim, let's start with the Super Bowl, which is coming up in 5 days. As you prepare for this game, what is an angle about this game that you feel is being under-discussed in the lead up to the Super Bowl?
Oh, it's tough because in terms of I don't know what everybody else is focused on. I guess I kind of, see, I don't know. I mean, I think I have a sense there's this, so much talk about Patrick Mahomes and his, impact on the game and kind of legacy and all of that. I feel like that is dominating the storylines. And I think it's probably fair to say if you were to look over to the other side, like Jalen Hurts, pretty early on in his career, has accomplished quite a bit. So, what happens if Jalen Hurts wins his second Super Bowl? What if that's the story? What if Nick Sirianni accomplishes things that people don't think that I mean, listen, I think there were talk about Nick Sirianni maybe not being back at one point in the year, but he's had a lot of success in Philadelphia quickly. So, I think the other side of things, just meaning the Philadelphia Eagles, is probably, at least in kind of what I've seen, been under talked about.
Some big news in the NFL yesterday. Myles Garrett saying that he wants out of Cleveland. Players of his caliber rarely become available. In terms of sacks by players through their first 8 seasons, only Reggie White, DeMarcus Ware, TJ Watt, and Jared Allen are ahead of Myles Garrett, who has 102.5 sacks in his first 8 seasons. I'm curious for your opinion on the market for Myles Garrett, because there are going to be a lot of teams that are interested in his services. I've seen comparisons to the Khalil Mack trade from several years ago from Oakland to Chicago as a trade that could work as a blueprint of sorts. How do you think this goes with Garrett? What do you think the price is going to be for him on the trade market?
Yeah, I think it'll reset the defensive end edge rusher market over, because of his age and, how long he's been in the league, over call it a 3-year span, right? I think he'll make more money over a 3-year span, or maybe a 2-year span, than any other defensive end has in the National Football League, because, it doesn't, you don't need all 32 teams interested in you to reset the market. Honestly, you need 2. I mean, you just look at what happened to Deshaun Watson when he was available, obviously different position and stuff, but he really had 2 shooters, it was, maybe you could argue 3, but it was basically, Atlanta, Carolina, and Cleveland. And I want to say that he got over $100 million more guaranteed than any other quarterback had ever gotten in the national. He was good at the time, but he was away from football. There was all kinds of other issues. And so now take a guy who really has been everything that you would want. He's been a leader. He's been a dominant player. He's been healthy. He's been quiet and been a good teammate on bad football teams. And so, I think it resets the market. And I think that there'll probably be more than 10 teams that at least are reaching out to figure out what it actually would take.
We'll talk with Tim Hasselbeck, ESPN NFL analyst and head coach of the Ensworth Tigers. Now, do you think that them Cleveland waiting, do you think some of it could be or potentially can be because Cleveland, not only if indeed they choose to move off from Myles Garrett and give him what he's asking for, now they've created 2 problems. They don't have a rush in now, at least not to the caliber of Myles Garrett, and they don't have a quarterback. So if you're Cleveland, if you're going to do anything, should you wait to see what Minnesota does with Darnold, if indeed you believe Darnold could be that guy. Because if they tag him, maybe y'all can work out a deal. But if they don't tag him, now you can position yourself to work out a deal with someone else, sign Darnold, and sort of move in that direction. The contract with Watson may not allow you to do that. I understand.
Right. Yeah. Look, I think there's obviously you need to be in communication about like, hey, what is your plan? Like, what do you think that you're going to do? Look, if you're Darnold, look, I don't think that, Darnold's not going to sign a tag right away. I wouldn't think. Right. So I think the challenge with assuming Darnold, or, obviously a high possibility that Darnold gets tagged. Look, I think that my guess would be what they do is they still take their time, doesn't sign the tag right away. And so I just think as far as a timeline of like, hey, what you need to do if you're the Cleveland Browns to get things going, like I think you can be in communication with the parties that are involved. At the same time, I think you need to, probably still go along the timeline that you can afford to go on. And if it's like, look, we can go get the world for Myles Garrett, then I think you need to go get the world for Myles Garrett and then start to figure out how you can, move other things accordingly to make sure that you have, look, if you're going to be starting new at quarterback, you're going to be, as you said, D-Mace, like you're not going to have the edge rusher. And so, look, you're rebuilding, like however you want to say it, like you're rebuilding. So if you're going to get a bunch of picks, you're either going to move them for more picks or you're basically going to host sale change and try to rebuild your entire roster and try to be good in 2 years. And that's really hard to do.
Tim, what possibly can this do to Jalen Hurts' career or for Jalen Hurts' career if indeed the Eagles win the Super Bowl? Because the way we look at sort of the quarterbacks nowadays, we have, obviously the top 4 or 5 guys. And then there's that other group of guys. And Jalen Hurts sometimes fit in that other group. Sometimes he doesn't. But if you look at all these quarterbacks, he's the only quarterback outside of Patrick Mahomes that have been to 2 Super Bowls in 3 years. Right. So why isn't it? Is it because of the road he travels and the people that he have on his team? And when I say road he travels, he doesn't have to play a Patrick Mahomes, a Jackson, any one of these, Josh Allen on his way to the Super Bowl. He doesn't get those quarterbacks, but yet and still he's been able to do what quarterbacks are supposed to do: win games or not be the reason why you lose a game.
Yeah, look, D-Mace, I think it's really fair. Now, I think there are other quarterbacks, Jared Goff, right? Yeah. Like who been to a Super Bowl, right? Just like Jalen Hurts, and then had a lot of success with another team, which is also like really hard to do. Do I think that, he gets talked about the way that some of the really good quarterbacks get talked about? No, I don't. And so, look, Matthew Stafford, for that matter, like Matthew Stafford, who's won one and been to, Super Bowls with different teams. And like, so just to like looking at it, or NFC championships with other teams, like looking at it in that regard, like, look, I think there are always going to be players who have a lot of success, like Russell Wilson, was probably in the same boat. So, they weren't the first round draft pick. They don't play the game in a way that makes you like get up off the couch and go, oh my God, I can't believe he just made that throw in that moment. But because of the team they're on, because of how they play the game, and because they're really good, like, yeah, they're in like that next tier for whatever reason in the conversation. But Jalen Hurts, look, does he have a great run game? Yeah. Is his defense really good? Yeah. But has he had a ton of success with the Philadelphia Eagles under a ton of scrutiny? Has he done everything that's been asked of him? Is it his fault that Josh Allen is not in his division or conference? Like, no, it's not. But look, he's going to accomplish more at this stage of his career, outside of a league MVP than Lamar Jackson has. But we don't talk about him the same way. Like, do I think that's fair? No, I don't.
Tim Hasselbeck is with us talking football here on Super Bowl week. Tim, you just sparked my idea light bulb. I want to follow back up on what you just brought up there when we look at the context of the Chiefs' success. But I've got one on the Eagles. A couple years ago, as we know, it was a great Super Bowl, went right down to the last play, basically, Chiefs-Eagles. I'm curious your thoughts on the Eagles' offense under the new, I think it's Kellen Moore that's running the offense. What do you think he's done, and how do you think it affects the matchup? Are the Eagles still going to be able to do their thing? Of course, now we know they have Saquon Barkley. They've got a much more fierce threat back there. But what do you think of that matchup, Spagnuolo versus Moore?
Yeah, well, so one, I think it's probably fair to say that he's the best defensive coordinator that's ever been in the National Football League. Like, I think it's fair to say that with what he's accomplished, in the stops that he's been and the success that he's had. So, look, Kellen Moore is facing an all-time great. I think the best thing that Kellen Moore has done is he's always been really good in the passing game and creative and found ways to get guys open. I think Kellen Moore has shown a tremendous amount of patience and willingness to do things outside of, what he would go and coach if he went to a clinic. And I say that because I think he's majored in the run game and he's majored in aspects of the run game that really he was not doing in Dallas when he was leading offenses that were the best in the National Football League. So I say that to say, look, I think still the best thing he can do in this game is be super patient and be comfortable continuing to call runs. At the same token, if you're going to beat Patrick Mahomes, like, you are going to have to score. And so just finding the times to throw the ball because you may need to throw to score at times. So I think that's where it's a little bit different, where I love his creativity. I love his ability to find opportunities to get guys wide open. But I would also say this, like, Philadelphia is different than every other team in the National Football League in that they can run outside zone and it might be a 67-yard touchdown. For most teams, those are 12-yard gains. But because Saquon Barkley is so remarkable, and because they have enough creativity in their run game with quarterback runs and different aspects of their run game that Kellen Moore's adapted to, like, Philadelphia is as likely to have a 40-plus yard touchdown throwing the ball as they are, running the ball, or more likely probably running the ball than throwing it. So that's unique to any other team in the NFL.
All right, now here's a history question that you made me think of. I was thinking about the Brady era, and one thing that has to be impressive, and I'm not sure it really gets talked about a lot when you're talking about how many rings does a guy have, but like, for example, Brady had to get past the Peyton Manning Colts a bunch of times. That was another really good team that was there every year. You mentioned Josh Allen. I think you implied that the Eagles' path to the Super Bowl may not have been as fraught with hurdles as in the AFC, where you've got Burrow, you've got Lamar Jackson, and you've got Josh Allen. That almost makes it, as I think about that, even more impressive what the Chiefs have done. Because you had the tail end of Brady and the Patriots in there, too, in the early years.
Oh, no question about it. Like to think of that path and the quarterbacks that you face. Yeah, because it's not just this year. It's been like, we're going to talk, if you're going to do it 3 years in a row, you're also talking about Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, like guys in their prime. You're not facing, those quarterbacks, but, oh, hey, so-and-so is on the tail end. So, yeah, I think that's why, it's probably why I said what I said about Spags. Steve Spagnuolo, like what he's done as defensive coordinator during that stretch. Look, I'm sure you haven't clipped the sound of it, but before Andy Reid ever won a single thing in Kansas City, and I had, played for Joe Gibbs, I had played for Tom Coughlin, and I had, was with Spurrier and Brian Jim Billick and John Fox, a lot of good coaches. To me, Andy Reid's the best. Like, Andy Reid is so good. He's done it with different quarterbacks. He's done it with different, with different organizations. He is remarkable. He is absolutely remarkable. And so I think you just like the combination, as people used to debate, is it Brady or Belichick? But the combination of Andy Reid, Steve Spagnuolo, Patrick Mahomes is incredible. And so to do it against, the guys that they have to do it against, look, I know people kind of, at least it feels to me, you ask me like what people are talking about, it feels to me that people are sick of the Chiefs. But I kind of appreciate it just because I know how hard it is. I was on bad teams. I saw good teams fail. But what they've done is incredible, and it's because the leadership there is incredible.
Tim Hasselbeck, ESPN NFL analyst, joining us on D. Mace, Vingen, and Donick. Tim, great stuff as always, my friend. Enjoy the big game this weekend.
Thanks, guys. You do the same. See ya.
Tim Hasselbeck joining us on the program. 615-737-1025. We'll take your thoughts on our phone and text lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Duncan fans, come experience the new age of Duncan at the grand opening of their newly remodeled Brentwood location at 4930 Thoroughbred Lane this Friday. Duncan will be giving away 100 days of free coffee to the first 100 guests in line starting at 8 a.m. Plus, Robbie and Rexroad will be broadcasting live from 6 to 9, and we'll have Predators tickets to give away.
Always looking forward to talking with Elliot Friedman on Thursdays. Let me tell you, as we talk hockey, Lee Company is a proud sponsor of our Nashville Predators coverage here. A little break in the schedule. Nashville on the skids. They need a little regroup, and they'll be back in action in Chicago on Friday. Our coverage brought to you by Lee Company. Proud sponsor of the Predators, in business since 1944. Hey, I noticed the last couple of days people are getting out on the baseball fields and getting ready for the spring sports. It's great, a little sneak peek for the spring, which also has you probably reminded, or should have you reminded, that you've got to get the air conditioning unit checked in your home. You want it looking good, running well for those hot summer months, and they're coming around the corner. They'll be here pretty soon. So get it checked and call Lee Company. They can help you with that. 615-567-1000 or leecompany.com. Get ahead of the game and then take it to the next level and get that year-round coverage with their home maintenance plan, where they check your heating, your cooling, plumbing, and electric systems. It's a great system. 615-567-1000 or leecompany.com. Lee Company, proud sponsor, Nashville Predators.
Hey, Preds fans, don't miss Smashville Live tomorrow night at Brewhouse 100 in Bellevue at 6 p.m. See your Predator star players up close and personal. Get some autographs and pictures, too, while you're at it. Preds player guests this week are Justin Barron and Nick Blankenberg. That's tomorrow night at Brewhouse 100 in Bellevue at 6 o'clock for Smashville Live. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. I asked Tim Hasselbeck about the aspect of the Super Bowl that's being under-discussed, and he mentioned just quite frankly, the Philadelphia Eagles as a whole, because much of the attention is on, and understandably so, much of the attention is on the Kansas City Chiefs' quest to become the first team in NFL history to win 3 consecutive Super Bowl championships.
Yes.
He brought up Jalen Hurts, and I saw this the other day. Jalen Hurts is one of 8 quarterbacks with multiple Super Bowl starts in his first 5 seasons. Here are the 8 quarterbacks, the 7, other than Jalen Hurts. Of course, Patrick Mahomes, Russell Wilson, Ben Roethlisberger, Tom Brady, Kurt Warner, Troy Aikman, and John Elway. Those are the 8 quarterbacks in history with multiple Super Bowl starts in their first 5 seasons. And I've heard Jared talk about Jalen Hurts and that Jalen Hurts perhaps isn't as good as people think he is because he's surrounded by a great supporting cast at wide receiver, at offensive line, at offensive coordinator with Kellen Moore. But I do think that Jalen Hurts is underappreciated for the things that he has accomplished so far in his career. And part of me, as cool as it would be, I think, to witness history. Now, I'm not going to get on my pulpit like Nate Burleson did after the AFC title game and say, be thankful you're alive to potentially see this. The Chiefs potentially three-peating. But part of me is rooting for the Eagles because I want to see what happens if the Eagles are the team that finally beats the Chiefs when it counts. What that will mean to the careers of players on the Eagles, specifically Jalen Hurts.
Well, we know how that's going to go, right? You're always going to be the man. Even if you win it just once. I think of Terry Crisp all the time. Every time we go to Philadelphia, the Broad Street Bullies they are forever legends. They won 2 in a row, and it doesn't matter how many years go by. That is the group. And so you win it one time, you are in.
You're a made man.
Let me ask you about the Hurts thing.
Female.
When you with Jared's theory, to me, this is the beauty though. When you do find the quarterback, that's not the high first round pick, and you can invest heavily in the players around him. That's the formula that has worked, and I think can work for other teams. And now Jalen Hurts is getting paid handsomely. And what does Hurts make compared to Mahomes or Tua and some of the Jordan Love and the ones that really cashed in last year? I feel like he's a tier below them, right? So you could argue he's at the right slot, but they have enough resources to still have A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith.
Jalen Hurts' average salary is $51 million, which puts him 9th in the NFL behind Dak Prescott, Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence, Jordan Love, Tua Tagovailoa, Jared Goff, Justin Herbert, and Lamar Jackson.
So do you think that's a fair return on investment, what you get from Jalen Hurts for $51 million? I would agree.
Absolutely.
I don't know how Patrick Mahomes is only making $45 million a year, but it's the precedent.
It's
right?
a long term. He's going to make the most money in one contract than any of those.
Yes, he is making $450 million.
Exactly. So they just spread it out so they can have cap relief. I think they did that not to the extent, but I think Tom Brady was doing the same thing with New England. Looking at Jalen Hurts, listen, I understand, because he doesn't hit you with these wild plays. He wasn't the first pick in the draft. He wasn't even a first rounder. So typically when you're not in sort of those, if you don't check those 3 boxes, people tend to look at your success a little bit different. They look at your success as, oh, well, it's because this person's there now, or you have this, or or this is because of that guy. They never just look at. Very seldom do they look at the guy's ability to play the game. And sometimes they go totally away from that because he doesn't have some of the attributes as these other guys have. But what he's been able to do, even before he got AJ Brown, he still was a 3,000-yard passer. Okay, when he got AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, the numbers start to increase. 37, 38. This year he went back down to just under 3,000. But his numbers as far as touchdowns went up. So they just helped. He was already a good quarterback, I believe, a great leader. You go ask the guys at Alabama, they'll tell you, a great leader. What you do with those guys, maybe he can't win you 13 games or 7 games by himself, just put the whole team on. Maybe he can only win you 1 or 2. But with the addition of those other good players, now he makes you more of a complete team. While all the while still being able to win you 3 or 4 games. And those other guys just do their job. But when they're not doing their job, when AJ's not doing his job in one of those games, that's when Hurts steps up. He's not going to win you 7 games like a Burrow or Mahomes or Allen or Jackson, but he's going to win you 3 or 4.
Yeah, and you hope your supporting cast
Exactly.
is picking up the slack. I'm looking at Spot Rack, too. And so the Eagles have been smart, too, on how to pay their stars. Because according to Spot Rack, Hurts's percentage against the cap, or the money against the cap, is only $21.8 million for this year. It really starts escalating in future years. It's up to $31 million next year, $41 million, $47 million in the next few years. So he gets more expensive the older he gets, but they've done a good job. And even Saquon Barkley is only 6.5 against the cap this year. It goes up 9.8 next year, and then up to 19.3 the following year. So the Eagles, I feel like, have done a good job of aligning their star players where they're getting a really good, not only just, action on the field, but it's costing them the right amount of money.
Exactly.
It's keeping their resources tight.
We will get more into the Super Bowl as the week progresses. Chiefs and Eagles this weekend. 615-737-1025. Speaking of the Super Bowl, at Super Bowl opening night, media day, whatever it's called, DeAndre Hopkins had something to say about the end of his Titans tenure. We will discuss that next. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025, 1063, The Game. D. Mace Vink in the Donic 1025, 1063 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville Studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. Last night was Super Bowl opening night, a.k.a. Media Day. And as we played earlier in the program, a lot of stupid questions get asked during Super Bowl opening night. We played a clip of someone asking Jalen Hurts, "Why are you so handsome? How can I be as handsome as you? My girlfriend says you are the most handsome." To which his response was, "I think that's a DNA issue." Not.
I think that's a you problem.
Basically, is what he said.
I'm laughing at Willie. I'm just laughing at Willie. I'm not going to tell you what he's done. I'm just laughing at
you can
Willie.
tell because it's a sponsor situation here.
Are you talking about Salsa Ritas?
Salsa Ritas.
Yeah.
Salsa Rita, y'all have a new fan, and I mean this
yes, you
with
do.
everything in me. This is his third place.
Oh yeah,
Salsa
Proud of
Rita's fresh
I had
Mexican
two,
grill.
so I ain't gonna talk.
I've
I
also
think we're
had
all
two.
new fans. I have to.
Salsa Rita's Fresh Mexican Grill at 2515 West End Avenue. If you want to eat as well as Willie Donick is, make sure you visit 2515 West End Avenue. Delicious. Thank you so much.
Especially
for
after the
lunch.
Vandy game on
Yes.
Saturday.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, it's right around the corner from Memorial Gym. That's very convenient for me.
Mm-hmm.
I
I
think we've
like it
done
a
a
lot.
good job of selling this.
There
I
we
think
go.
we should have, we should
Honestly, it is high end. It is
Pretty
the
good.
flavor
high
is
end on West
fantastic.
End.
Yeah.
There's your tagline, everybody. So DeAndre Hopkins, as we know, plays for the Kansas City Chiefs now, is going to have the opportunity to play in the Super Bowl for the first time in his illustrious career. Traded from the Titans to the Chiefs earlier this season. His final game as a member of the Titans was against the Buffalo Bills, one of those many blowout losses that the Titans suffered this season. I recall near the end of that game, DeAndre Hopkins standing on the sideline. I believe he was standing right behind Brian Callahan. He wasn't getting in the game. He played it off at the end of the game, if I recall correctly. But Nick Suss, who reports on the Titans for the Tennessean, is in New Orleans, and he asked DeAndre Hopkins about the end of his Titans tenure. And DeAndre Hopkins had a very interesting response. This was DeAndre Hopkins yesterday at Super Bowl opening night.
I went to, when we lost to the Bills, and, there was a lot of stuff in the media saying that I got benched. And, I'm not the type to go on social media and then speak my truth or, to speak what happens because I feel like everything kind of always passed. But I didn't get benched. That's the first time in my career where I was like, man, I don't belong out here on this field right now. We weren't winning. No plays were being called for me. Not that I'm a player that ever needs the ball, but on the field I want to be included in something. And so I took myself out of the game, and I saw a lot of things in the media saying I got benched, and I let it go. But the next day I went to Rand office, and I was like, man, I'm almost losing love for this game, being in this situation. And I could talk to Rand like that because Rand, he understands me, and he was like, man, I see it in your eyes. I see it that, this isn't a place where you might want to be. And, we had that tough conversation, and the next day I got traded to the Chiefs.
That was DeAndre Hopkins. I know the sound quality wasn't great because I believe Super Bowl opening night is held, at least it was yesterday, at the Superdome. So there's a lot going on.
A lot of noise.
Here is the important part of what DeAndre Hopkins said. He said, quote, "We weren't winning. No plays were being called for me. Not that I'm a player that ever needs the ball, but if I'm on the field, I want to be included in something. So I took myself out of the game," that being the Bills game, the Titans-Bills game. He then said, "The next day I went to Rand Carthon's office, and I said, man, I'm almost losing love for this game being in this situation." And the next day, he was traded to the Kansas City Chiefs. You don't normally hear a player that open about this situation, but let's talk with our resident wide receiver. Maybe we can throw it into the wide receiver translator.
Well, and as we get the wide receiver translator heated up, okay, I think this is a good moment to drop in the fact that Jared wanted to extend DeAndre Hopkins for nothing, but a pretty penny before the season started, before he knew how the season was going to unfold. He said, "You got to do it now. Re-up him right now.
And there were a few people that were on that same
No.
bandwagon.
Good move.
Mhm.
Not to do like I look. He's 33.
Mhm.
I don't know where his career is going from here. He has not really been a main guy for the Chiefs. Am I wrong?
No,
Like
yeah.
here are the Chiefs wide receivers. Okay, we know who they are. Xavier Worthy, up and coming rookie, interesting future. Sky Moore, Hopkins, Rashee Rice.
They got Hollywood
Nico
Brown back.
Juju
Remigio.
Smith-Schuster.
Right.
They got Hollywood Brown back.
Yeah, Marquise
You
Brown.
put all those guys together, and you don't have anywhere close what A.J. Brown is making for the Eagles. So it's an interesting way. Like you said, they rely on Mahomes to elevate. So of all those guys, I have not really seen Hopkins be a main guy. He is a bit piece to them, right?
Yeah.
So
He-
this
other
is
than,
what he is. This is a Super Bowl type of team.
Yeah.
Who doesn't have a lot invested in the other wide receivers, and still he has not become an important guy. But he obviously in his mind, and this is part of being a great receiver, you always believe that you're open and you can still get it done.
Here are
right?
his
But
numbers.
age is catching up to him.
Here are his numbers, by the way, with the Chiefs since the trade. He's appeared in 10 games. He's been targeted 59 times in 10 games, 41 receptions, 437 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Those are his numbers during the regular season as a member of the
So
Kansas
steady.
City Chiefs.
Steady.
In
not
the
spectacular.
playoffs, he has 3 targets with 1 reception for 11 yards.
Okay.
And by the way, one texter said, dude, you cannot understand a single word Hopkins said. Was this recorded from 30 yards away? Yes.
Kind of, yeah.
It kind of was. But before Derek answers, I just want to read the quote again because I do have the transcribed quote. The important aspects. Hopkins said, quote, we weren't winning, meaning the Titans weren't winning. No plays were being called for me. Not that I'm a player that ever needs the ball, but if I'm on the field, I want to be included in something. So I took myself out of the game, meaning the Bills game, his final game in the Titans uniform. He later said, the next day I went up to Rand's office and I said, quote, man, I'm almost losing love for this game being in this situation. So that's the quote. I know. All right. Now that we have that, now Derek can respond.
One, I did not say this was going to happen. The minute they brought on Calvin Ridley, I told everybody exactly what was going to happen. And it happened. I said they were going to trade him. I said there was going to be this, especially when Ridley wasn't getting the ball early. I said, this is about to change because they brought this man in here for damn near $30 million per year, and you're not targeting him. I said it's going to start to shift. But even before that, it was like, man, there's rarely in the NFL where you have a veteran guy like Hop that comes in, and he's been that guy for so long. And that first year with that team, he's still that guy. Why? Because there's nobody else really that can compete with him because they're really all young. But then you bring in the next following year, you bring in that veteran guy. He's young, but he's a veteran guy that has put up some numbers. Now he becomes the number one. It's hard for that number one that used to be the number one that's now the number two to accept that. And people kept saying, it'll always be D-Hop. No, it won't. They paid that man close to $30 million, meaning Ridley. They're going to eventually gear the offense toward him. And guys that are in the ilk of D-Hop, they just don't understand it. I didn't understand it when it was happening to me. I felt I still can play. I still could play. I still could play. I had 3 more 1,000-yard receiving seasons after that. But you always feel that no matter who they bring in, the young stud, the mid-age stud, you still the guy. You always think that. And you always want to be a part of the offense. And what I think what he didn't realize is, because I don't think it happened anywhere he was at other than here, because they got rid of him. They traded him Arizona before that really started to happen. So he really wasn't ever a part of it. He was always the guy that was replacing the older guy. Fitzgerald. He replaced Fitzgerald. Before that, Andre Johnson.
Mhm.
He replaced. So he's never been in that position. And this was the first year he was. This year was the first year he was in that position, and he didn't know how to handle it. I understand it. It's a shock when you go from being the number one guy to not being targeted as much, but in your mind, you feel you still can do it because when they do throw you the ball, more times than not, you're going to make the play. He couldn't understand that, but I think what he did was wrong, taking himself out of the game. I'm not going to get too much into that because we crucified, everybody in the world crucified the young man in San Francisco when he left and walked off and quit. Rightfully so. The linebacker, rightfully so. Now, when you hear something like this, it's like it's ultimately really the same thing. You quit on your team. You said, I'm not playing anymore.
Yeah, what I thought this was interesting, Derek. He really wanted to make a point that he was not benched.
Exactly.
That he took himself out of the game. I'd almost rather it be out there than he was benched.
Yeah, I would have rather taken, okay, he was benched.
He doesn't go on social media a lot.
Which come on. He tells this.
But he didn't like that it was out there that he was benched.
Yeah, so my thing is this. When it happened, what did I say? I said Rand did him a favor. That's the minute it happened. Yeah. I said Rand did him a favor. Y'all gonna start listening to me, okay? He traded that man because he knew he was done here.
But is he done just here, or is he done being a first-rate wide receiver?
Well, he's done being a first-rate wide receiver.
I think I could question. Yes.
No, I think he was done being a first-rate wide receiver the second year. After the second year here.
But Jared wanted to extend him.
Yeah, I thought he was done. Once they brought Calvin Ridley, I'm like, okay, they got a true number one.
Jared wanted to extend him after he got hurt in training camp.
But
just remind people when Jared makes his point, which he's very good at making with authority and passion, and it sounds great. But just remember to listen and think and reason. Just because it's loud doesn't mean it's just the right thing to do.
Jared Stillman, always catching strays on this program.
Oh, you know he will. But listen, I like what he said in regards to him taking himself out the game. I don't like it because essentially you quit on your team. And you never even tried to go back in the game. You just when you sat over there, I knew exactly what was wrong. You could tell anybody anything you wanted to. I knew exactly what was wrong. Body language. And it's like, just because I'm not saying it 20 million times in your ear, I'm saying it one time and I'm definitive about it. When I saw him on the sideline, his posture told me, yep, he's done. He took himself out of the game. One of two things happened. They either said, you know what, we're trading him, so we don't want to get him hurt, or he just decided to take himself out of the game because he wasn't a part of the offense.
I remember he was still wearing his helmet.
Yeah, no, he took his helmet off for a minute, but then he put it back on.
All right. I remember the shot on the sideline of him like standing right behind Brian Callahan.
Exactly, with his helmet on. And Brian Callahan was asked after that, after the game about that whole situation. I don't recall what he said, but I know he was asked about it. But my thing is, I don't feel bad for him. Why? He knew exactly what the situation he was coming into. The problem was that he wasn't getting the money that he thought he was going to be able to get when he became a free agent. When all those teams, because he had an opportunity to go to Kansas City. He did. He would have won a Super Bowl last year. He had an opportunity to go to Kansas City. He said he didn't want to go to Kansas City. Why? Because he wanted the money. Well, you came to a team that if you really would have paid attention to what was going on, if you would have really looked at their roster, you'd have been like, no, I'm not going there. And I'm not going there.
But they offered him the most money?
But they offered him the most money. And he came. So, at the end of the day, however he got to Kansas City, he got there because I guarantee you after last year, he was probably thinking like, man, I wish I'd have went to Kansas City. Well, he got, I think, his wish.
And from the Titans' perspective, I think this is a check. Wait. We put it more time. I can't say it.
We hadn't decided yet.
I'm not going to say it.
We hadn't decided yet.
I'm not going to say it. Okay. I'm going to say.
No, say it. Because we hadn't decided on that one yet.
It's a check the box for Ran Carthon in the positive side.
Banned word.
I didn't think we discussed
DeAndre
we need a
Hopkins
sounder on that. Ran Carthon successfully recruited DeAndre Hopkins to Nashville, paid him a reasonable amount of money, got one good year out of him. I think last year he was a positive it was better that they had him that they didn't have him, than they didn't have him, right? He was good. It's about what we thought, right? We said from the start, don't expect the 1,500 yards, 1,600. This is not the same guy. But he played. He got him decent production. He was solid. And then they got a pick back for him. That's a positive.
Exactly.
But do we agree? No,
I agree.
That's good use of resources from the Titans aspect. And for the Chiefs, they're giving a 5th-round pick for a guy that could make a play in the Super Bowl. He hasn't made a single play for them in the postseason at all, worth anything. And if you look at since December, he's done basically nothing.
He had that one big game against Tampa.
Yes, he had a good game against Tampa. 8 catches for 86 yards. He's still not a yards per catch guy. But, yeah, he had a good – they won it in overtime. That was a really fun game.
Yes.
But he was he's just kind of an extra piece that
to what they do
on the chessboard that Andy Reid can use that they haven't really needed to use to this point.
615-737-1025. What are your thoughts on DeAndre Hopkins' comments yesterday about the end of his Titans tenure, talking about how he was, quote unquote, losing love for this game, being in this situation, meaning being in the situation the Titans found themselves in? 615-737-1025. I also have a question for Willie.
Here's another question, too.
Yes.
Where will he be next year? Just ponder that as we go to the break, too.
I also have a question for Willie and Derek that I would like to ask when we come back from break. So 615-737-1025. Before we get there, tune into 102.5 and 106.3 The Game today for Vanderbilt men's basketball. Another tough test for the Commodores, Willie. They take on Florida in Gainesville with a 6 o'clock tip-off and the pregame show starting at 5:30. Coverage is also available on the 102.5 The Game app and at thegamenashville.com. Vanderbilt men's basketball presented by Athletes Unlimited Pro Basketball, coming to Nashville's Municipal Auditorium February 5th through March 2nd. Go to auprobasketball.com for more details and to purchase tickets.
Let's talk Loan Pronto. What could you do with a big chunk of cash that you are sitting there going, man, I wish I had a chunk of cash because I've got X, Y, and Z. Maybe it's a home improvement project. Maybe it's bills that you got to pay, a nagging car loan. Like, I got to pay that car off. I'm getting killed with the interest payments. Any of these things that may be on your mind in your financial game, consider Loan Pronto. They can get you a better interest rate. They can get you that cash in a hurry. And it's so much more hassle-free than it used to be. They're the leader in quickly converting home equity for homeowners into cold, hard cash so you can pay off whatever bills you need to pay or start that home remodel. They've got several easy options to let you access that cash quick. No paperwork, no cumbersome process, no junk fees, and often no appraisal. So get approved in as little as 1 day with no hard credit pull. Get the process started by calling right now, 615-499-5780, or go to loanpronto.com. That's 615-499-5780, or go to loanpronto.com. Get that money you need. Equal housing lender, NMLS 166-1781, subject to lender approval, NMLSconsumeraccess.org.
D. Mace Ving in the Donic 1025, 1063 The Game, talking DeAndre Hopkins. His quote last night at Super Bowl opening night, talking about the end of his Titans career. He said, quote, "We weren't winning. No plays were being called for me. Not that I'm a player that ever needs the ball, but if I'm on the field, I want to be included in something. So I took myself out of the game." He later said, "The next day I went up to Rand's office and I said, man, I'm almost losing love for this game being in this situation."
Almost. I'm
Almost. Not
losing the
quite.
love.
Almost.
I could get it back.
On the
if you
right
trade
team.
me.
On the right
Yeah.
team. As I was listening to this, my mind went, as it normally does, to professional wrestling. And it reminded me of a famous promo that Shawn Michaels gave in the late 90s when he had to relinquish the WWF title. And he said he, quote unquote, lost his smile. And that's how I felt about DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins losing his smile playing for the Tennessee Titans. But we have calls on this. Let's go to Howie in Houston on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Howie, thank you for calling. Please go ahead.
Hey, good noon to you, gentlemen. Good to see you on the radio. I'm declaring this now. You are my favorite radio show.
Thank you.
Clip that, David. Clip it
Clip
right
it.
now. Thank you,
My
Howie.
favorite. Okay, now, wanted to say with DeAndre Hopkins, first of all, it's definitely easy to, dissect the quote, right, and criticize him for quitting, right? And we're going to see that run with across the social medias. But I want to propose this, is that leadership. My question is, do you see a void in leadership in the Titans? The reason why I ask that is this, is that when Mike Vrabel left, would we hear or see Hopkins do something like this if Mike Vrabel was the coach of the Titans? Because he mentioned, not getting the ball, not getting schemed. Mike Vrabel was the kind of coach that would have players buy in, right? And I just don't think that if Vrabel was there, you wouldn't see this happen. And I think that what I'm concerned about, I'd love to get your opinion. I see Ridley and Hopkins as like lions. They're both hungry. They want to eat. And I think that when you get lions together, you got to have someone above them to get them to work together. And my concern and question for you guys is this. Do you see a void in leadership that will persist, that is unaddressed on the personnel side, that will continue to exacerbate no matter who they bring in unless it's addressed? So I think that's an ongoing issue, and why we see players step out like Hopkins on the sideline. So yeah, love it. Love your thoughts on that. Thanks again, guys. Appreciate you.
Thanks,
Thank
Howie.
you, Howie. I think some people wonder that regardless with the Titans front office. And that's what we've been sort of debating for the last year and a half. The structure in which the Titans are in or aren't in or whatever it may be. But it seems like hopefully now, but it didn't seem that way last year, because it seemed like there was still this sort of inner struggle within the organization with Vrabel his last year in Rad Carthon. I thought last year, I thought they were, at least from the outside looking in, it was much more of them losing than I think it was, the front office. But that's what happens when you start losing. People start questioning the front office. But I think now, once it all happened, maybe the fan base is in a better place. After listening to Brinkert and Borgonzi for the last 2 or 3 weeks, maybe the fan base is in a much better place than in what they were prior to this. But that's always going to be a concern, I believe, with the fan base until they start consistently winning. Now, as far as would Hop have done this if Vrabel was here? I think Hop would have did the same thing, because here's the issue, or I'm not going to even say it's an issue. Here's the thing, and I explained it earlier. When you have a guy that has never been in that position where he was being replaced, he doesn't know how to handle it when it happens. The first year of Vrabel, everything was cool. He was the lead dog. They won 6 or 7 games, 6 games, I believe. They were not as bad as they were this previous year. Fast forward to this previous year. They bring in another guy that's going, now he's going to be your number one. Whether Vrabel was there or not, the problem was created the minute this team started losing. If they're winning, hop, just like other receivers, they may not be happy, but we're winning. So I'm going to go along and get along. I'm just going to ride this thing out. Don't be a distraction. Go out there, play hard. The minute you started losing and losing in the fashion that they were losing in, and you are not a part of the offense anymore, you don't know how to handle that. So I believe whether Vrabel was here or not, had they started losing in the fashion they were losing this year, it would have happened.
David is on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHunter.com. David, thank you for calling. Please go ahead.
Hey, good afternoon, guys. Great conversation, by the way.
Thank you.
This is probably a tack on to the last caller's comment, but and maybe more so for Derek as a former player, but they're obviously going to have to go through some restructuring. And just like Derek or D-Hop said, you know, he had a love loss for the game. That's an emotional restructuring as well. So how do you restructure emotionally the team, Derek, when you get to a position like this? I'll hang up and listen. Thanks. Yeah. Have a good day.
Thanks, David.
Thank you. You never want to get to a point where, you know, your locker room, essentially they're not playing for you. Essentially is every man for themselves. And depending on, you know, what they're doing from a stat standpoint, that's how their attitudes is going to be. If they catch 8 balls, then I'm good. If they catch 2, and it's like, man, it's, you know, when you're in a situation like this, and if those feelings are created through a locker room, that's what you're going to get. I'm not saying that was created within the locker room of the Titans, but it seems like now that's the way D-Hop felt, was, okay, I'm not catching the ball. I'm not a part of the offense, and we're losing.
My quarterback is not really good.
Exactly. Like, and he's not looking for me anymore. And he got hurt, and the other guy comes in, and he's not throwing the ball to him. It's like, I don't like. Why do I need to be here? Like, and I get it. I totally understand it. You know, because he's never been in this situation. Unfortunately for him, not only does he go from the lead dog to now he's behind the lead dog, your team's losing. He can probably stomach not being the number one guy if they're winning. Because again, you go out and you give it all you have, and you don't want to be a reason why if you lose a game, it's because you were not, you know, you were arguing about getting the ball and you weren't happy out there. You go out there and you compete. During practice, during the week, you may say what you need to say to the coaches or whatnot throughout practice, but when you're on that field, you're competing. So had they been winning, that would have been him, but he still wouldn't have been happy. But when you say, man, I'm losing joy, listen, it can happen. How do you put? I was in that space. My second year. Was it my second? No, my third year. Beginning of my third year. Because I'm like, man, no matter what I do, it's not like they're going to put me ahead. When they ask me to go out there in offense and catch a football, that's what I do. That's all I do. But yet and still, I can't sort of crack the ceiling. And I got to a point where, and I've told this story before, but I got to a point where it was like, man, I don't even feel like being here. Like, I don't even want to be here, period. And, you know, Chris, I guess he saw it in me. I thought I was doing a good job at hiding it, but I guess he saw it in me and was like, listen, man, one thing you cannot do, regardless, is allow them to steal the joy that you have for this game. Don't do it, because they go about their lives. After you leave, they go about their lives. It's you that's affected. So go out here, and regardless of what they do, go out there with a smile on your face, enjoy the game, and let them make a hard decision. And that's what I did after that. And it ended up working out for me.
All right, so let's circle back to D-Hop here. Where do we think he ends up next year? Because you mentioned it, D-Mace. He's got to be coming to the grips with reality. He's not going to get a big payday anymore.
On his couch is my answer. I don't.
You don't think he'll play?
No, especially
this is where the love of the game comes in.
I think it'll be late in the game.
Especially if the Chiefs win, I think he retires on top.
Yeah, if the Chiefs win, I can see him just retiring.
I could see
period.
that.
But if they don't win, he's going to be a guy that his agent say, "Hey, listen, let's take this deal before as free agency starts. Let's do it because if we wait, there's not going to be any money out there, and all the spots are going to be filled. So let's take this. It may not be
There's
the
always a
greatest
crop
deal.
of people that happens.
Let's take it. He may be like that, or he may be like, man, I know I'm waiting. I'm better than this. And what happens with those guys is you tend to not get picked up unless somebody gets hurt. And we're talking about July, maybe August, maybe September, October, November. So you're trying to keep yourself in shape, so one of the two could happen with him.
So we conclude that there's a chance that he's not playing for anybody next year.
Mm-hmm.
He's grappling with his career.
But Jared wanted to extend it before the season.
Okay. Willie just wanted to get that shot.
Yes.
Sure.
He's grappling with his career mortality, which is
Exactly.
what Derek
We all
was
go
talking
through it.
about. It's coming to a point where he is not the DeAndre Hopkins we know him as. And that's why I think even if he doesn't get targeted in the Super Bowl, even if he runs 5 total routes in the Super Bowl, and Patrick Mahomes never looks in his direction, if the Chiefs win, I think he goes out on top. If they lose, honestly, I still might think he'll be done. But
I can see him making one play, right?
Mhm.
Just maybe one or two. Maybe it's just a third down pickup.
Yeah.
And that might be a big play in the game that keeps a drive going. Well, I feel like it's going to be probably a close game, like most of the Chiefs games are. And I do see what the Chiefs
may be critical to a drive.
And he's got to have that mindset that at this stage of his career, that's maybe what it takes to win a Super Bowl.
615-737-1025 will continue to take your thoughts on our phone and text lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com about DeAndre Hopkins and his comments about the end of his time with the Tennessee Titans, talking about how he was almost losing love for this game. Not completely, almost. But then the Titans threw him a life preserver by trading him to the Chiefs. But I do want to get to that question that I meant to ask Willie and Derek in this segment, and we'll do that next. We'll also take your thoughts. 615-737-1025. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063. The Game. D. Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 1025, 1063. The Game. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. Since Willie wants to keep pointing out Jared's old DeAndre Hopkins takes, here are 2 tweets from his show from July 25th, 2024. Quote, the @Titans want DeAndre Hopkins, and DeAndre Hopkins wants the Titans. What am I missing? Just sign him. Now on @1025 The Game. Later in that program, I am shocked, in all caps, I am shocked that @DMason85 is against signing DeAndre Hopkins to a contract extension. Derek had 404 receptions, 4,874 yards after he turned 32 years old.
Okay, and there was a third one that you found saying that the injury to D-Hop should not deter them from signing him to an extension.
I do have to find it. I lost.
You
Okay,
read-
DeAndre Hopkins' knee injury does not give me reason to fear an extension for the 32-year-old wide receiver. If anything, it might make Hopkins more willing to get a deal done. Discussing now, August 2nd, 2024.
That didn't age well. It did not that D-Hop got hurt, but it's just, I mean, listen, why Jared wanted to keep D-Hop so bad, I have no idea. The signs were there in regards to him, aging in this game. He wasn't the receiver that he once was. And again, here's the problem. And we all go through it, at least, I have. And, it's that just because you think you can do it, is still go out there and be the number one guy, doesn't mean 32 owners out there still believe you can be the number one lead dog. I want to reiterate that. Say that again. Just because you may think you're still the lead dog at age 31, 32, doesn't mean that 32 owners believe that, or 32 GMs out there believe that you're that same person. Because that's what matters, truly, is them. Because they are the ones that are giving you the contracts. So if they do not believe that you are that top flight guy, they will not sign you as such. And a priority to sign you will not be there unless they were a team that was on a cusp and they needed that second wide receiver to kind of give the first guy, a little space. And if they don't get space, at least we know this guy is going to catch the ball.
So what I'm hearing from Derek is, to quote Homer Simpson, you tried your best and you failed miserably. Yes. The lesson is never try.
Never try.
But my question for the two of you, and I think I know what the answer is going to be. I was thinking about this last night as I was listening to and reading these quotes. How much, if any, is this an indictment on the Titans organization that things are so bad on the field that DeAndre Hopkins was losing his love for the game?
I think it's no indication on the Titans. It's just the arc of a career. I don't. The quarterback play was poor. Mm-hmm. He had been injured in training camp and had not really gotten fully back. He had made a play here or a play there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They were playing Buffalo.
Mm-hmm.
They were getting their butts kicked.
Oh yeah.
And so it was a rough day. It's if you want to say the Titans were a bad team and that contributed to it, well, yeah. But I don't think it's how. Are you trying to imply they didn't handle the situation well?
No. What my question is, and the question I was asking myself last night was, are the Titans in such a bad spot as an organization? Things are trending downward that a player of DeAndre Hopkins' caliber was losing his love for the game by being a part of the Titans.
But what caliber was he when that happened?
That's a fair retort. That's why I was asking the question.
I think that's why I think that's what I have tried to.
I think that's a fair point.
It's a career arc, which has been a tremendous career. Mm-hmm. Borderline Hall of Fame, maybe.
I guess my question is, if DeAndre Hopkins was playing for the Chiefs this whole time and the results were the same, would he be feeling that way?
Okay, results were the same. The results for the team would be different, right? But the question is, would he have been able to accept a role that he has had to accept since he's been traded to the Chiefs, which is a role player? If you take a look, he is some weeks he's in the game plan, and most of them were early when they got him. And as he's been there more, he's been less and less in the game plan.
But would he be able to accept that more if he was playing for a team
For a winning team.
that was winning that much.
Yeah, he would. Yeah, I'm
That's
telling you.
probably
Yeah,
like-
I'm telling you flat
He'd
out.
look bad if he didn't. Like,
Yeah.
what do you think would happen if he's like, hey, these Chiefs, they don't know what they're doing. They're not using me. The Chiefs were like, okay, we'll just get somebody else.
Exactly.
We're going trying to win a Super Bowl here.
Why do you think people look at Antonio Brown so the way that they look at him? Because he was a hell of a talent. He is a Hall of Fame talent. The numbers bear. If you watched him play, he was a Hall of Famer. People didn't like that Tampa was still winning, Pittsburgh was still winning, but you were still fussing about getting the ball. That doesn't look, especially when you are so demonstrative the way he was in doing it. That doesn't sit well on the fan base. Even those that may like you, it doesn't sit well with you. So I don't think D-Hop would have went out of his way, especially not in Kansas City. D-Hop didn't ever come off as that type of guy. But I don't think he ever in Kansas City, if they were winning, he would have made it a big issue. Now, would he have went to his receiver coach and talked with his receiver coach? Absolutely. Would he have probably went to, the offensive coordinator, not Andy Reid, but absolutely. He may even went to Andy Reid. But ultimately, if they're winning, every coach is going, probably with the exception of his wide receiver coach. My wide receiver coach may, that relationship is a little bit more intimate. Outside of your receiver coach, the offensive coordinator and the head coach / offensive coordinator is going to tell you the same thing. Hey, listen, we'll try to get you the ball, but we're winning. What more do you want us to do? You don't have an argument. You really don't have an argument going into their office when you're winning, But I don't think he would have got it. Now, if you are a good organization and you see sort of a guy feeling a certain way, you approach that guy before it even gets out of hand. Again, I've been through that. So I understand when you see a little, it's like, okay, let me go talk to this guy to see what's going on. And I'm talking about the coordinators. I'm not talking about the head coach. I'm talking about the coordinators. They come and talk to you. And then eventually you go talk to the head coach.
One texter said that Hopkins needed one more touchdown for an incentive bonus, and they haven't thrown it to him since. I don't know that. He, according to this story,
the Titans had a bonus too for that.
He needed one receiving touchdown to get to 6 this season and earn a $500,000 bonus. That didn't happen. Now, I don't know how many times they haven't thrown to him.
And he also would have had to, wasn't a stipulation too, that if he played a certain amount of the plays during a regular season,
it was 60% of the snaps,
from
right?
40. It would go from a fourth round.
That was the draft. That was the draft pick condition.
Yes, draft pick.
Sorry.
It would go from the 4th round to the 3rd round, or the 5th round
to the 4th.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he didn't make that.
No, we did not.
Didn't make that.
Adam from Portland is on our phone line.
And you predicted. You said
exactly. He's not going to make that.
He said he might play 63.3, but he won't play 66.
He won't not, because they don't need him like that.
No, they don't. Adam from Portland is on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Adam, thank you for calling. Go ahead.
Dude, forget what he said. D-Hop, I felt so good about when we got rid of him because I wanted him to go have an opportunity. It's the same reason I wasn't throwing a fit that Derrick Henry almost ran for 2,000 yards again. You weren't going to do that here. So go get your opportunity, man. I still love that dude. If you lined them up, A.J. Brown or D-Hop, who do you want to get a ring? I want D-Hop to get it all day. I don't want A.J. Brown to get a ring because partially the reason he's not here is on him. D-Hop, it was like, hey, we're nothing, man. Give me an opportunity. I'm still showing up to practice. I'm still doing everything I'm supposed to do, when healthy. I did all I could do for you. I wanted to see him go get a ring, man. So I'm good with D-Hop. I'm totally good with how it ended with D-Hop.
Thank you. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Adam.
See, that sort of played into what I said earlier. Like, you take A.J. Brown in his situation, and Adam was just like, I would rather Hop get a ring before AJ. When AJ didn't pull himself out of a game ever, and he didn't know whether he was going to get the big contract or not. He never pulled himself out of the game. And D-Hop sort of did do what AJ Brown did. He could have stayed. He could have played it out, but he wanted to leave. He was losing the joy. And listen, I don't fault him for that. I do the whole removing yourself from the game. That it doesn't sit too well with me. But everything else, it's like, okay, it's a part of It's a part of the process as you get older. Things like that happen. So I understand it. So I'm not upset with him about it or think it was he did something wrong at all. But essentially, both guys did the same thing. AJ held out. Listen, he wanted his money and he deserved his money. And he's proven he's a top 3-4 receiver in this league. AJ probably realized, like, man, maybe I want to go somewhere where I know immediately I can win right now. Did he probably think that was the case here? I don't know. But essentially, he got what he wanted. AJ Brown going to a winning organization and still able to get money. And D-Hop got exactly what he wanted. He got his money from the Titans, and then he asked, calmly, diplomatically, I want to go. That's basically, he did it in a diplomatic way. Hey, listen, the joy is not there anymore. And Rand Carthon, being a former player, looked at him and said, yeah, you do us no good now. The minute that's like telling.
And also Rand Carthon, I think, understood, okay, look, do I really need him at this point? Where is his future with our organization? I think he could see that, look, they've got Ridley. Hop is good. I can get an asset. We need draft picks.
Exactly.
Like it's a win-win, really.
And that's like your fighter.
AJ Brown was different. Like, it's like, hey, man, that guy's going into his prime.
Exactly.
What is he worth? Should we pay him? Those were different questions.
And what can we get for him? Obviously, we know how it all went, but it is what it is.
That's like good.
Yeah, that's like saying you train your boxer for this match the whole time, and then you get into and you're 4 rounds deep, 5 rounds, 6 rounds of 12 round bout, and he looks at you just plainly and says, I don't have it no more. I just don't. What are you gonna do?
Yeah.
You throw him back out there, gonna get his head knocked off.
Yeah.
So you just like, all right, we're done. Because you see it, and he said Rand saw it in his eyes. So essentially, he did the same thing that AJ Brown did, but diplomatically.
615-737-1025. If you have any stray thoughts on DeAndre Hopkins, you can let us know at 615-737-1025. The Predators, they lost again. That small flicker of hope that may have emerged after they won 5 games in a row, extinguished because they've lost 5 games in a row. And they have some hard questions they need to ask themselves. We'll get into that next. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. D. Mays, Fink, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, here with you. There was a time, not too long ago, the Nashville Predators, they started to play better. They had won 5 in a row. They had won, if I'm not mistaken, 7 of 10. Things were trending in the right direction. There was a little flicker of hope. Hey, maybe they can turn things around.
There's a chance.
Then they lost 5 games in a row in regulation, and we're done. So this season, with roughly 30 games to go, in terms of a playoff chase, it's not happening. It wasn't happening a long time ago, but I think we can put to bed finally that it's not happening, which is unfortunate that we're in early February, and the Predators, in terms of the standings, don't have a lot to play for. But it's going to lead to some hard questions about how the Predators should proceed and how clear the path is back to contention, which is what the Predators were trying to do when they went hog wild in free agency and Stein, Steven Stamkos, and Jonathan Marchessault and Brady Shea. So we're going to tackle some of these questions. The question we've talked about quite a bit is the age of this team. We talked about a story in The Athletic recently where the Predators, in terms of their top 6 forwards, by 5-on-5 ice time per game, their average age made them the oldest group in the league. The Predators, according to The Athletic, have the number 8 prospect system in the NHL. Which sounds good, right? There are 32 teams in the NHL. The Predators are number 8. But then I read the lead on this story written by Scott Wheeler, and he says the Predators are a difficult team to slot because their top prospect is probably the least exciting among the top 10 pools in the league. They're the only team in the league with 9 first-round picks in their pool. But it goes to, and by the way, that number 1 prospect on this list was Tanner Molendyk. But it speaks to another issue that the Predators are having. They've got some solid young players. We've seen some of them this season, Willie. Fedor Svechkov, Zachary Leroux, Tanner Molendyk on the way. But do they have that clear-cut alpha number 1 prospect coming up? It doesn't look like it. And can the younger players and the older players, as they continue to age, find that sweet spot where they can be competitive in the next couple of years? Because if you want Steven Stamkos in his prime and you still want Roman Josi in his prime, you got to act quickly. So the Predators find themselves, I think, in a precarious spot because it's going to be difficult for them to thread that needle. So that's the first question. How clear, Willie, do you see the path back to contention? And we can define contention however you would like. I usually mention contention as having a legitimate chance to win a championship. How clear is that path back for the Predators? It looks pretty dicey from this seat right now.
Yeah, I think not impossible at all. And I think when Barry Trotz put this plan forth, he realized that this could happen, that there was a chance that this could happen. And number 1, I would point out first, let's give them credit for having number 8 in the prospect pool while they're doing this. Because the other teams that you're going to see, like, for example, the Red Wings are number 5. The Red Wings have missed the playoff for 10 straight years. So let's put it in context of Barry Trotz does not really want to do a 7, 8, 10-year rebuild. The team that beat them last night, the Senators, it finally does look like the light is going on for the Red Wings and the Senators. They're the 2 hottest teams right now in the East.
The last time the Ottawa Senators were in the playoffs, it was the Eastern Conference Final, Game 7. The Penguins score in overtime to face the Predators in the Stanley Cup Final. That was the last time the Ottawa Senators made the Stanley Cup playoffs.
Yeah, and they haven't been close, really, since then. So they've gone through a lot of pain just to get to this point. and they're hot right now. We still don't know if they will get in. Same thing with the Red Wings, who have missed for even longer. So all that being said, I don't think Barry Trotz wants to go down that road. I think in this market, where you don't have generations of fans, you basically have a couple generations now, not 10 generations. A 7 to 10 year rebuild would be a really tough thing, I think, even for the most diehard fans. So how do you try to mesh a good prospect system? And I agree. The question is, how good will the top prospects end up being? Are they going to be Roman Josi level? Do you have a Philip Forsberg in there? Do you have a UC Saros in there? Those types of players that are really moving the needle, all-star players. I think it's pretty safe to say that they have a very deep pool of very good players that are going to play in the NHL. That's one thing. And let's take Luke Evangelista, who's no longer considered a prospect. He's aged out of that. But let's take the next couple, Zach LaRue and Fedor Svechkov, who are still just 21. We're seeing that they're NHL players. They can play good NHL games. But are they going to be consistent players you can build around and count on month after month, year after year? Phil Tomasino had some good weeks, good games, even some good months, but he got to the point where they felt like he wasn't going to be, the time kind of ran out on him and they had to move on. So this is what you need. You got to have some big hits. And in the meantime, you mentioned the age of the roster. I think you still are in a window where, okay, how many more years of Roman Josi do I have where I can think he still is an elite defenseman? He's having a down year. Philip Forsberg, compared to last year, is having a bit of a down year. How many more? What's my realistic window for the next 2 to 3 years? Can I still stay in a window if I have an invigorated group of young players that are coming up around them? I think that's the goal, and it's not an easy goal.
The question, Derek, is how the Predators use one of the questions, because we have many questions. One of the questions that we have is, how should the Predators use the remainder of this season? If the playoffs are a near impossibility, if not a complete impossibility, there's going to be trades. We're not necessarily talking about they need to sell everything, because that's a different conversation. But in terms of the games they have to play, what should be their focus? Should their focus be calling up younger players who may not have been in the plans this season to give them an opportunity so that the Predators can scout them and see if they could be part of the solution, which means you might have to scratch some veterans from time to time? Is it experimenting with things from a systems standpoint? And we'll talk about that. That's one of the major questions as well. But what is the best way for the Predators on the ice to use the remainder of the season when they really don't have anything to play for when it comes to challenging for a playoff spot?
I guess some of it depends on if they choose to make moves. And I know some of these salaries will not allow them to do maybe, some changes that other teams would possibly do in this position. But, as the trade deadline comes up, what are you in a position to do? Okay, say if you don't do anything, then okay, it's like because what you don't want to do is head into the off season trending downward. That's what you don't want to do. You don't want to head into the down, because last year, when they made all those trades, we just thought that, okay, they're going to take a dip. And actually, they started to play a lot better. And then they went to the off season, saying, okay, we saw a lot of good things from a lot of these young guys. What if we add these 2-3 guys to the mix? We should be an even better team. So I think that's why the optimism was there, because they had played so well, toward the tail end of the second half of the season. And it sort of bled over into the offseason, and they made those signings. I think you want to go into the offseason that way still, regardless how you get there, because they showed that they can get there even while bringing young guys up from Milwaukee. They showed that it seems like for some reason the pressure was off and they started to play a lot better. maybe that is the case this go around. You bring up some of these young players, you give them an opportunity to play, depending on what you do, during the trade deadline. And then you see how your veteran guys react to that, and see, it's not making a push to make some playoffs in quotations. It's a push to see, how much can we get out of this team that we feel we can use next year as well. If these young guys come and they play, right now, and they show us something, maybe then we can rely on them, at least anticipate them getting even better in the offseason.
I think they're going to have a chance to reset for basically 2 weeks after Friday and Saturday. And the right now, I see a team that's mentally beaten down a little bit, physically a little tired after 4 games and 6 nights. And this brings up interesting questions to your point, Adam, for the big picture. But I think when they won 5 in a row, I did think they started to have a little bit of hope. And then when they let a couple of games get away where they played well but lost, I think it kind of took a little bit of their fight out. And I think they got fatigued. And now I think they're really at a low in terms of their mentalness. I think they'll be refreshed when they come back out. But that being said, I think the reality is, look, they've got a chance to have a top 5 pick here. So I think you're not trying to lose at all. You'd like to see them win, but at the same time, I'm willing to, if I'm Barry Trotz, experiment a little bit, try some different things, try some younger players. You're probably going to logically move on from some older players at the trade deadline. I think the market will be good for a seller, and I think they will clearly be sellers at this point. But I think a bigger question, too, is between Barry Trotz and Andrew Brunette, do we need to take a look at how we play as far as our pace? Andrew Brunette has a way that he wants to play. I saw a bit of a fatigued team the last couple of games. They were not the faster team out there. It's a high-energy, demanding system, and as you point out, some of the core players are going to be in their 30s, and next year they're going to be even older than they are now. So is there a better way to play that will have this group that is largely going to be back next year of 30-somethings? Can they be more effective? What tweaks need to be made to be more effective?
We're going to get to that in the next segment. But before we do, Scott is in Hendersonville on our phone line driven by WilsonCountyHunter.com. Scott, thank you for waiting. Please go ahead.
Well, I think I agree with a lot of what Willie said. I just wanted to make one observation and get Willie's thoughts on it in particular. Last night, talking about being mentally tired. I don't know when it's been that I've seen the referees affect a game more than I have last night. From the terrible double minor on LaRue where he got popped in the face and he kind of popped back, but it wasn't near as egregious as the first one, and got a double minor to, there's like 3 trips that weren't called, including the big one that probably should have been a penalty shot. And it was just, after all the bad luck, I can understand being mentally fatigued and welcoming a 2-week break. But, I want to get your thoughts on that. But I would just say anything we do for the rest of the year has to be, we want to find out and, who's dedicated to winning next year. Just find out which veterans, which rookies, that should be our goal. Is we've got the roster. We should be in the playoffs should have been in the playoffs this year, but that should be the entire focus for the year.
Thanks for the call, Scott.
I think that is the reality question they have to tackle is this a team that just had everything that could go wrong went wrong? Or is this a team that has flaws, and what flaws can be tweaked? Because I think if you're just saying, hey, we just had bad luck, let's just run it back. I don't think that's what Barry Trotz and Andrew Brunette are going to do. I think they're going to say, look, we did have some bad breaks. Anything that could go wrong has gone wrong. And I think Scott brings up a good point. They didn't catch a whole lot of breaks with the refs. There were some questionable calls, but I think when you watch the 2 teams play, Ottawa was the better team last night and deserved to win. Was that a bad call on Adam Wilsby as he was going in for a semi-breakaway and he got his legs taken out? They didn't call it, and they came back down and scored. Yeah, that was a tough break. Were they a little bit out to get Zach LaRue? I kind of think you could make that argument. But all that aside, in the big picture, they were slower than Ottawa. Andrew Burnett wants to play fast. So what can you do along those lines? And I do think the style is something to look at. Can Andrew Burnett make some adjustments? Or can Barry Trotz infuse the lineup in with a few more guys that are a fit to his style?
615-737-1025. We're going to discuss that point. Coming up next, we'll also get to your calls and texts at 615-737-1025. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063. The Game. D-Mays, Finn, Ginadonic, 102.5, 106.3, The Game, talking Predators. Let's get to Bob on our phone line. Bob, thank you for calling. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, guys. A couple of years ago when the Predators brought up all those young players, you know, they were being kind of, I guess, given an audition, so to speak. And some of those players have left, and some of them are still around, but maybe not quite hitting as much as people would have liked. My question is, and I'm still out in terms of my verdict on that, but what do you guys think? Do you think that they're bringing up some of these young guys before they're ready, maybe because of circumstances beyond their control? I'm just curious about whether Trotz likes to use the term marinate the prospects in Milwaukee, and I'm wondering if they're bringing up some of these guys too early and that's having a negative effect. But I'd like to know
who would you have in mind in particular when you're thinking of that, Bob?
Bob is gone. Oh, sorry, Bob. You can text us, Bob, and let us know. But the idea of bringing young players up too early.
This is an age-old question, I think, too.
In any sport, really.
Yeah. When you're drafted at 18 and you go through the process, like let's take Joakim Kemmel. This is Joakim Kemmel's third year at the AHL level. He's still only 20 years old. He's still one of the youngest players in the AHL. He's an AHL All-Star, but he still probably isn't quite ready. Now, I think the time has probably come to take a look at him. This is what you have when you're not in the race, and, you know, it's not essential every night, whether you win or lose. You can take a look and see where he is and give him a little valuable experience. But this is one of the things that I think is the toughest thing for a GM is, and we can go right down the list of Eeli Tolvanen and Phil Tomasino and Juuso Parssinen. I think all of those guys have had patches of success where you're like, do you have something here? It really looks like you might have something here. And then it just doesn't happen. And then they go somewhere else. And most of the time it's about the same. Tolvanen, I think, has turned into a good, solid player on an okay team. And he's probably what he should have been for the Predators, but it's not like they gave up on a superstar. It was tough because they got nothing for him. They did get something for Parssinen and Tomasino, and we'll see where their careers go, but I sense that they're kind of what they are at this point. And you try this so many times, and it helps so much when you get a guy like Roman Josi, who wasn't a first-round pick, to blossom into a franchise player like that. Those are gold. And they're sort of due to have that happen. They need that, I think, to be able to thread this needle, right? To find a blend of young players who can come up and support players who are still have something to give, right? I think Roman Josi, for the next 2, 3, 4 years, will still be a really good player. He may not be a Norris Trophy winner. He'll still be really good. I think Phil Forsberg's got 2 or 3 more years in his prime where he could get 40 goals. I don't think that's the problem. I think it's, how do you support those guys? How do you get those waves of players that make you tough to beat every night?
Okay, so I am going to read verbatim from our friend Robbie Stanley, who just tweeted this within the past couple of minutes, because this is the question that we were going to ask anyway. And Robbie does a good job of laying it out. So I'm just going to read verbatim Robbie's tweet. Thank you, Robbie. For me, the fundamental question the Preds must honestly assess as a team from now until next season: how much of this season is everything that could have gone wrong went wrong, and how much of this season is they're fundamentally flawed in roster construction / the way they play? And that's the question.
I think I asked that right before the break, didn't I?
You absolutely did.
Robbie probably worded it better than I did.
Everybody gets involved in this station. We're all about cross promotion on this station. We take shots at Jared. We read Robbie's tweet on the air. That's just how it happens. But yes, that is the question you asked yourself, because you asked all of us, is on the surface, Andrew Brunette has been the head coach of this team for 2 seasons. The team has gotten off to slow starts in both seasons. The Predators were able to overcome it last season by going on a franchise record point streak. They haven't had such luck this season. and Willie, you and I dig deep under the surface and look at underlying numbers and such, but just on the surface, Predators fans see a coach whose team has gotten off to slow starts 2 years in a row, and there are questions about his system and whether his system is too difficult for players to comprehend, or it takes too long for them to comprehend it, and that puts them behind the 8 ball, so to speak. But this is the question. Is it Barry Trotz? Because look, they are working together on this. Barry Trotz is not making roster decisions independent of Andrew Brunette. They are working together. But is Barry Trotz not bringing in the right players for Andrew Brunette? Or does Andrew Brunette, as you said, Willie, does he need to adjust and find a method of play that better fits his personnel so that they don't get off to these slow starts? I mean, it's the sort of a chicken or the egg kind of thing.
I think the answer is like it is in most things. I think these are two excellent points, because I do think that they have had a lot of bad luck. They have had a lot of misfortune. But that is not the full answer. Part of the answer is the other part that Robbie has brought up, that I think Barry Trotz has been really open in his discussions weekly with Jared,
which he will do again today, by the way.
That it hasn't been a fit as much as he thought it would be a fit. Well, let's take Brady Shea. I think it made perfect sense to say, I'll swap Ryan McDonough, who is older, 5 years older, 6 years older than Brady Shea, for the last couple of years of his contract, and I'll take Brady Shea at less money, and I'll have him. But the trade-off for this year has been a huge drop-off. Brady Shea has not been comfortable and not had a great year. That's one central thing that they've got to figure out, is how do they get better mileage out of Brady Shea, because it's not like he's 35. He's 30. He's going to be here for a long time. They've got to get mileage out of him. And a lot of that's on Brady Shea. Some of it, too, is like, how do you use him correctly? But Ryan McDonough was way more valuable and effective last year than Brady Shea has been this year. Let's take the same guy, Gus Nyquist. Everything that could have gone right for Gus Nyquist last year went right. 75 points. Some of these shots that he was making last year, pick the corner, upper corner, great play. He's such a heady player. He's got a huge hockey IQ. This year, when it's time to make the plays, nothing has gone in. It's gone the complete opposite way. He's hit the post or he's missed the net. The frustration. I wish he almost destroyed all of Chris Mason's belongings the other night. Last Wednesday, Chris Mason was doing the commentary between the benches. Gus Nyquist sits at the end of the bench, right next to where Mace was. He slammed the door 2 or 3 times in frustration, and all of Mace's stuff went flying off of the table there. The monitor went flying. He couldn't see the replays for a minute. But that's the frustration that Gus Nyquist has experienced this year. Kiefer Sherwood, Michael McCarron, Colton Sissons, Mark Jankowski, Cole Smith, all of those guys, 12 to 15 goals last year. This year, I don't think any of them are going to hit close to 10. Not one of them. Kiefer Sherwood has moved on. Kiefer Sherwood had that extra speed that I think they're missing. Jason Zucker, Anthony Beauvillier, while not great goal scorers, I think they had a little more speed. They were a little bit better fit. So I'm trying to give you reasons why it worked so well last year and it hasn't worked as well this year. Some of it's personnel. Some of it is poor puck luck. And so it's a very detailed answer, but this is really the job, I think, for Andrew Brunette and Barry Trotz, is to say, where do we go for here? You can't go back and search for last year anymore. Too far removed from that. It's what does it need to look like next year with what we have?
Well, whatever it looks like, if you feel that you need, because listening to you guys, and it's like, well, do we tweak the system? Maybe these guys are not performing in a system. They're a little bit too older to perform in a system that is a rigorous system. If you start to go down that road, frankly, you just need to change coaches, because if you've been doing this for so long and you've gotten success out of it, it's hard for you to then sort of pivot and do something else. Now, you may be able to do that for a while, like tweak a couple of things, but it's a long season. So you're always going to feel in your mind like I need to, if I'm going to do the job I want to do, I got to be able to coach it the way I have history with the way I coach. I have winning experience with the way I've coached. So if I can't do it that way, why do you even have measure head coach? It's basically, if you got to tweak the system, that's like saying, well, we need to tweak what the head coach for the Tennessee Titans, you need to change what you do, Brian Callahan. And Brian Callahan is like, man, okay, how much can I deviate from my system that is going to still keep us, try to keep us successful, but also stay true to who I am to the core. So if you're asking Coach Bruno to change his system, well, how much of his system are you asking him to change, to tweak?
We talked to Elliot Friedman a lot about this. His statement was he thinks the best coaches over the long haul are able to adjust their system to their personnel.
You can.
But I see your point.
Yeah.
It's not Andrew Burnett's preference to play differently. He has a vision of how he thinks the game should be played, and it's been hard to get the most out of this group. The 3 right-hand shots, I think, is another thing that I would bring to the table as something that has been something that they have had a hard time meshing. And then the last guy that I think is worth mentioning, who did we talk about before the season a lot that would be essential in the team taking the next step forward at the center position?
Tommy Novak.
And what kind of year is Tommy Novak had?
A bad one.
It's hadn't been good.
Right. And so why? That's the question, right? In the last couple of weeks, you saw, at least during the 5-game winning streak, and even on past that, you started to see why they saw so much in him. He looked more like the player, but it was at the wing, right? And he never got any traction playing at the center position. So what do you do about that going forward? These are all things that I'm sure they've already discussed backwards and forwards, but as they try to figure out what direction to go, this is where I think the experimentation, I think you can once and for all say, okay, chasing the miracle run, though it's probably past that time now, and it's time to really start saying, if we're going to bounce back next year, what can we try here? Do we try to tweak the system a little bit here? Do we try some different things and be upfront with the players about it? Not everybody may like it, but let's try it and see what we need to do so we have a true evaluation on where to go in the offseason.
When I took a stand earlier this season, I believe it was after 25 games, I came on this show and I spent an hour explaining why I would fire Andrew Burnett. My reason for doing so, the main crux of my argument was, at that point of the season, you could still salvage the season. There had been enough examples of teams thriving after coaching changes. I had the data to back it up, that if the Predators were trying to get that boost to get back in the playoff race, then was the time to do it. At this point, I don't see a reason to let go of Andrew Burnett. I think Derek brings up an interesting point. I think that Andrew Burnett is going to enter next season firmly on some sort of hot seat, whether it's, scalding hot or, maybe just a smidge too hot. He is going to be under a lot of pressure. And, we've seen this text a couple of times. Someone just texted in and said, if everyone is having a bad year, is it bad coaching? Another texter mentioned, if all of the players get worse in the system, how could it not be the system?
I think that is a question that is a logical question to bring up without a doubt. I think they're all asking that. I do see teams bounce back and do have a bad year and be fine the next year where it just doesn't go right. But I think that is something they've got to look at, right? Is what's the best system for this group of players? Let's also bring another thing to the table. The headline for this team is what? They're not scoring. They have all these goal scorers, and they're not scoring. They're still towards the bottom of the league in goals per game. The second part, though, that doesn't get talked about a lot, because Andrew Burnett's philosophy is, I want to take the game to the opposition. I want the puck. I want to drive it. The best defense is not being in your own end. To play in the other team's end. But they have been exposed this year defensively and they are giving up way too much quality. Last night was a great example. I thought UC Soros played a good game. Not a spectacular game, but he played well. They gave up a ton of heat, way, way too much. Their defensive zone coverage, and they're the first to say it here recently, especially, that there have been some big breakdowns there. So what do they have in Justin Barron, Adam Wilsby, Spencer Stastny, Nick Blankenberg? Are those pieces to keep, or do they need to find other things? How do they find more for Brady Shea? That's an area that probably is under-discussed because there's been so much focus of why can't these guys score, right? Is that fair?
Yes.
Adam, I think these are all little things. How could you start making up the ground and get back to what you're used to in this market, and that is being a solid team that gets 98 to 100 points and has a chance to win some playoff games?
615-737-1025. If you have any stray thoughts on the Predators, you can get them in now at 615-737-1025. The Predators are back in action on Friday in Chicago. We'll wrap up the show next. Willie Donnick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingate, 1025-1063. The Game.
Hey, this is Derek Mason, and you heard me tell you about Dr. Lodge and his staff over at Cool Springs MD for some time. If you set out to lose weight, chances are it's not your first time setting a goal to shed some extra pounds only to face disappointment. But at Cool Springs MD, Dr. Lodge and his team understands the frustration of this cycle, and that is why they offer a different approach to weight loss. Their comprehensive weight loss program is led by Dr. Jeffrey Lodge and addresses the root cause of weight gain with tailored nutrition, exercise, blood test supplements, and more. They will customize a program specific to you and you only. So connect with Dr. Lodge at CoolSpringsMD.com today to schedule your appointment for a personalized weight loss plan just for you. That's Cool Springs MD, where your weight loss journey becomes a success story.
D. Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. Willie Donick had to step out a little early. That's okay. We'll hold it down for him. Stoneman and Company, live from Radio Row in New Orleans, coming up next. Barry Trotz, if I'm not mistaken, will join Jared at 4 o'clock today, as opposed to the usual 5 o'clock.
That's correct.
Because Chris Mad Dog Russo will be joining the Stoneman and Company program at 5 o'clock. Barry getting bumped for Chris Russo. Barry Trotz, a Tuesday guy. So is Chris Russo.
So
I think Barry should be a Thursday guy.
So
but Barry's a Tuesday guy.
Wouldn't that see? That's what I mean. Like Russo, based upon the sort of, I guess, metric, the week metric, based upon your guess, he would more than likely, he should be a Thursday guy, right?
He should be.
But he's a Tuesday guy.
So for those who are saying, what the heck are they talking about?
Metric.
So Brian Curtis.
What's a metric?
Brian Curtis, who works for The Ringer, he writes about sports media. He talked about the hierarchy of guests on Super Bowl Radio Row. And depending on what day you make the rounds, that speaks to how important you are. So Monday guys are at the bottom of the list. Thursday guys are the most important because that's when the heavy hitters show up. Friday guys are better than Wednesday guys, but not as good as Thursday guys because most people leave after Thursday. It's kind of complicated.
So wouldn't Friday be like the bad day?
And wouldn't that be the worst one?
Exactly. You would think, right, Adam? Friday, because everybody's leaving.
You get
Thursday.
the leftovers.
Right, but Friday's kind of like the stragglers, the important people leave out on Thursday evening, and who's ever kind of, it's like ghost town on Friday, allegedly. Jared can tell us more about this. But Barry Trotz, he might be a Tuesday guy on the show, but he's a Thursday guy in our hearts.
Okay.
Tomorrow on our program at 1 o'clock, Vanderbilt men's basketball coach Mark Byington will join the program. The Commodores are back in action tonight, a game you can hear right here on 102.5, 106.3 The Game, against the number 6 Florida Gators on the road. The Vanderbilt Commodores, a tough one over the weekend, lost by 30 points at Oklahoma. I thought this was interesting, Derek. According to ESPN, Vanderbilt has the second hardest remaining strength of schedule in the country. We talked about the SEC being a murderer's row in basketball. They beat Tennessee. They lost to Alabama. They beat Kentucky. They're at Florida tonight. They host Auburn a week from today at Memorial Gym. Then they go to Tennessee. Then they go to Kentucky. Like it's tough. And I'll be curious to hear about Mark Byington's thought about the state of play in the SEC. I think it was Jay Billis of ESPN said he thinks it's going to be harder to win the SEC tournament this year than the NCAA tournament when you consider the quality of competition just within the conference. But Vanderbilt, after a tough one on Saturday, has a chance to redeem itself against the Gators tonight.
Yeah, I mean, the SEC, not only is it like a gauntlet to get through in football, it has become such the same thing in basketball. And Vandy is going to feel sort of that wrath with the remaining games that they have. Listen, their schedule, they have some big wins on their schedule. Obviously, you know, Kentucky was a big win, but I think even more so, UT was a even more of a win for them, even though they beat UT first and then came back and beat Kentucky. But like you said, Adam, their second half of the season isn't getting any lighter.
6
whatsoever.
of their next 7 games are top 25 teams.
Yeah, so but that just tells you how strong the conference is. Now, listen, this could sort of be a double-edged sword here, because this can do you in, you know, meaning with the teams you have on your roster, on your schedule, you may end up losing way more than you win. And that will essentially probably put you outside of March Madness. But say if you win 2 of these games, maybe even 3, now that firmly puts you in the tournament, I think, regardless of what you do in the SEC tournament. Because I think because the SEC is such a dominant conference this year, just like in football, where just because you lose to one of your conference foes, it may not mean as much. But if you win, man, it can bump you up even more. Because what are you doing? You're essentially playing top 25 teams for the remainder of your schedule, Vanderbilt.
So one texter says, why do the important people leave on Thursday? Do they not stay for the game as it relates to Radio Row? This is a quote from the story on The Ringer from 2023. Friday's the big secret. That's the getaway day. By Friday, the megastars have flown home. A Friday guy is bigger than a Wednesday guy, but not as big as a Thursday guy. It's complicated, man. You have to know your lane when it comes to Radio Row at the Super Bowl. The heavy hitters are on Thursday, and they have to go somewhere else, I guess, after that. I'm sure some people stick around for the game. I know Jared is not going to the game. I think he is returning after Friday's show. But it's as we talked about at the beginning of the show, it is an interesting situation. There is one thing I do want to address as it relates to the Predators conversation. We have a texter who mentioned it during our last segment. I know Robbie and Joe touched on it this morning. There's a lot that's wrong with the Nashville Predators this season. But there's one thing that I can't get behind. And it's this idea that Roman Josi being captain has something to do with this. We've talked about this many times. Do you think the result would be any different if Ryan O'Reilly was the captain of this team or Steven Stamkos was the captain of this team? I just think that because Roman Josi is a mild-mannered, it looks like he is a male model straight off the runway. He doesn't have that intimidation factor that Shea Weber had. He doesn't have that grizzled, outdoorsy vibe like Mike Fisher had. That Roman Josi is unfit to be captain. Keep in mind, the first year that the Predators made Roman Josi captain, they won the President's Trophy. So there's a lot that's wrong with the Predators, but I don't think Josi's leadership is one of them. I've seen a lot of that on the text line. I saw it in the YouTube chat on Robbie and Rex wrote this morning. You can miss me with that. I don't think it's an issue of player leadership that the Predators are in the position that they're in.
No, and I don't think that has ever come out of that locker room in regards to Josi. Listen, Josi is sort of he's the face. He's the captain, but that doesn't mean there are not other leaders on that team. To whereas, listen, Steve wasn't, mouthy or cursing people out or, rah-rah. That was Eddie. But both of them were great leaders. Eddie was more of the vocal leader. Steve was more of the guy. Listen, I'm just gonna go out and I'm gonna play. I'm gonna say things every once in a while, but I am going to lead by example. And not that Eddie didn't lead by example, he did. But Eddie was the more vocal with the leadership. If you're asking for, if you're asking for just a leader, lead by example, then okay, pick Steve. But if you're asking lead by example, but also have that voice that speaking that can speak for, then you would pick Eddie. Both of them have great leaderships, but that's the one thing that Eddie had that I don't think Steve had. Not because he couldn't, he just wasn't that type of guy. Eddie was more outgoing. So just because, Josi doesn't scream, yell, and do all this stuff all the time, doesn't mean they don't have somebody else on that roster that does do that from time to time. So questioning whether this is a bad team or not because of Josi's leadership, I think is baseless. It truly is. I don't think there's anything behind that.
I think Shea Weber was the captain of some bad Predators teams.
Exactly.
I don't remember hearing people being upset about Shea Weber's leadership. I think Roman Josi is an easy target just because I just think that people have this antiquated notion of what a leader is. And if you're not screaming and yelling and knocking over Gatorade coolers and sticking your finger in your teammate's face when things aren't
talking loud
going well,
and
right,
talking all the time.
Right. There is a lot that's wrong with the Predators. Don't get me wrong. I would not put Roman Josi's leadership anywhere near the top of that list. But that'll do it for us today. Tomorrow on the show, Mark Byington, Vanderbilt men's basketball coach, will join us. Jonathan Hutton from Hot Mike in Withrow will join us. But coming up next, live from Radio Row in New Orleans at the Super Bowl, Jared Stillman. That'll do it for us. 102.5, 106.3, The Game.
Be loved, love of your people. Have a blessed, wonderful, and